Greetings, Lore Lords. Tonight our chronicle covers the stumbling steps of the newly risen, those clumsy, frantic and often fatal first hours in the lands between. We're going to walk through the greatest missteps, the tragic blunders and the hilarious oversights that define the Tarnished experience. From the windswept plains of Limgrave to the rot-infested swamps of Caelid, we will trace the path of failure so that you might find the road to lordship a little less bumpy. It is a world of golden light and crushing darkness, where ancient demigods wait to grind your ambition into dust, and where the environment itself seems conspiring to send you back to the loading screen. Let's be honest, you probably wouldn't survive a trip to the local convenience store in the lands between without some serious enchanted gear and a pocket full of rune arcs. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world. I always love seeing how far these stories travel. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Our story begins not with a bang, but with a creaky, rusty elevator ride. You have just awakened in the Chapel of Anticipation, likely met a swift and humiliating end at the many hands of a grafted scion, and plummeted into the damp depths of the stranded graveyard. After navigating the cold stone and the subterranean gloom, you step onto a lift. As the platform rises, the darkness gives way to blinding light. You push open the heavy double doors and are greeted by one of the most breathtaking vistas in gaming history. The first step. The wind howls softly across the grassy plains of Limgrave. Ruins dot the horizon, and looming above it all, the glowing monolithic trunk of the Erd Tree dominates the sky, shedding golden leaves that drift like phantom snow. It is a moment of pure wonder. It is also the setting for the very first and perhaps most common mistake in the entire game. Standing just a few hundred yards ahead, pacing slowly on the path that leads to the crumbling church, is a knight. He is magnificent, clad in heavy, gleaming golden armour, wearing a helmet adorned with the plumage of a tree and mounted on a massive armoured warhorse. He looks important. He looks like a challenge. He is the Tree Sentinel. And for some reason, hardwired into the gamer brain by decades of linear progression, the first thought that crosses the mind of the freshly awakened Tarnished is, I see enemy. I must kill enemy. This is the trap. This is the first harsh lesson Hidetaka Miyazaki teaches you, and he teaches it with a polearm the size of a telephone pole. The mistake is assuming that simply because an enemy is placed directly in front of you, you are meant to fight it, immediately. The narrative camera in your mind pans to your character. You are likely wearing rags, or perhaps the basic armour of a vagabond or samurai. Your weapon is unupgraded. Your health bar is roughly the size of a toothpick. You approach the Golden Horseman, confident in your dodge-rolling abilities, perhaps fueled by the adrenaline of just starting a new adventure. You lock on. The Sentinel stops his patrol. The horse rears up, letting out a terrifying metallic whinny, and before you can even locate the attack button, the golden halberd slams down with the force of a falling building. You died. The screen fades to black, and the lesson begins to sink in, though for many stubborn souls it takes 10 or 20 more deaths to truly accept it. The Tree Sentinel is not a tutorial boss. He is a geographic hazing ritual. He exists to shatter the expectation that you are the most powerful thing in the room. He is a wandering field boss scaled for a character with much higher stats and much better gear than you currently possess. Mechanically, this encounter is designed to crush you. The Sentinel's attacks have delayed timings that punish panic rolling, a habit you likely picked up in other games. He has a massive shield bash that covers a deceptively large area, and his horse can sidecheck you into oblivion if you try to circle him too closely. Core to the game's mechanics, defeating him awards the Golden Halberd, a weapon of immense power that deals holy damage. However, and here is the punchline the game plays on you, even if you manage to defeat him through sheer grit and 3 hours of chip damage, you cannot wield his weapon. The Golden Halberd requires a strength stat of 30 and a faith of 12. As a starting character, you are likely 10 or 15 levels away from even lifting it properly. The reward for your stubbornness is a heavy paperweight you can't use for another 20 hours of gameplay. There is a fascinating bit of obscure lore tied to these imposing figures that makes your early demise even more thematic. The Tree Sentinels are not just random knights, they are the heavily armoured protectors of the Erd Tree itself. According to item descriptions found later in the game, specifically on their armour set, they were once honoured defenders who received the grace of the Erd Tree directly. However, after the shattering they remained at their posts even as the world fell apart. The irony, which you feel acutely as his halberd flattens you into the dirt, is that they are protecting a path that eventually leads to the rejection of the very order they serve. They are living, fighting monuments to a stagnant past, literally blocking your progress into the future. The community, of course, has spent years debating the philosophy behind this placement. Some fans argue that the Tree Sentinel is the ultimate skill check, a gatekeeper designed to force players to master the mounted combat mechanics, which you don't even have, yet, as you haven't met Melina to get your own spectral steed Torrent. This leads to the hilarious sight of a Tarnished on foot trying to outrun a Destria in full-plate barding. Others argue, more convincingly, that the Sentinel is a tutorial in open-world logic. In previous titles like Dark Souls, if a demon blocked a hallway, you had to kill the demon to see the rest of the hallway. In Elden Ring, if a Golden Knight blocks the road, you are supposed to realise that there are bushes to the left and right. You can crouch, you can sneak, you can simply walk around him. That is the intended solution to the puzzle of the Tree Sentinel. Avoidance. The mistake isn't losing the fight, the mistake is taking the fight at all. By fixating on the shiny golden distractions, players miss the subtle environmental storytelling directing them elsewhere. Just past the Sentinel is the Church of Ele, a sanctuary of safety. To get there, you don't need to be a hero, you just need to be a coward. There is a certain dignity in tactical cowardice, especially when your opponent is a 10-foot-tall zealot who can reflect your magic spells back at you with his shield, a nasty surprise for any astrologer who thought they could cheese the fight from a distance. Yes, his Erd Tree Great Shield has a built-in retaliation mechanic. If you fire a glintstone pebble at him, he doesn't just block it. He parries the magic and fires a golden projectile of his own straight back at your face, usually resulting in an instant kill. It is the game's way of saying, "Nice try, wizard, but you're not smart enough for this yet." So, the first great blunder of the Tarnished is one of ego. We see the challenge, and we refuse to back down, wasting precious time and sanity on a foe that offers no immediate benefit. We bang our heads against a golden wall, forgetting that we are in an open field with no walls at all. The wind whispers through the grass, urging us to move on, to explore, to find easier prey and better equipment. But we stay, caught in the loop of death and rebirth, driven by a stubborn refusal to admit that, for now, we are beneath the Sentinel's notice. Avoiding him is not weakness, it is wisdom. It is the first step in understanding that in the lands between, survival is not about winning every fight you see. It is about picking the fights you can win. And as you sneak past him, listening to the heavy thud of his horse's hooves fading behind you, you realise that the world is vast, terrifying, and indifferent to your presence. You have survived the first mistake, but the road ahead is long, and right behind you, hidden in the tutorial cave you just left, lies another tragedy. One born not of aggression, but of ignorance. But before we ever stepped out into the blinding radiance of Limgrave to be flattened by the Tree Sentinel, there was a quieter, darker choice we made, one that haunts many players for dozens of hours without them even realising it. We must rewind the clock, back down the elevator, back into the gloom of the stranded graveyard. You have just woken up from your first death, shaking off the salt water and the shame of the grafted scion encounter. You trot through a small tunnel and come to a ledge. To your left, a set of heavy doors leads to the outside world. To your right, a spectral figure sits slumped in a wooden chair, glowing with a faint, ghostly white light. He gestures toward a dark, gaping pit in the floor. "Take the plunge," he whispers, "of learning and remembrance. Here lies the second great mistake, and it is one born of deep-seated gamer conditioning, skipping the whole of knowledge." The psychology here is fascinating. For years, video games have taught us that falling down dark pits is bad. Pits mean death. Pits mean losing progress. Furthermore, the spectral figure looks eerie, and in a From Software game, trusting a stranger usually leads to being kicked down a hole by a bald man named Patches. So, a staggering number of players, driven by a survival instinct that is actually misfiring, look at the ghost, look at the pit, say, "Absolutely not," and walk straight out the front door. They choose the safety of the path they can see, bypassing the subterranean tutorial entirely. By doing this, they inadvertently sentence themselves to playing Elden Ring as if it were Dark Souls 3, completely missing the mechanical nuances that make life in the lands between survivable. Down in that pit lies the Cave of Knowledge, a series of damp, moss-covered chambers designed to recontextualize combat. If you skip it, you miss the introduction to the guard counter. This is not a smaller mission. In previous titles, blocking with a shield was passive. You blocked, took the stamina hit, and waited for an opening. In Elden Ring, blocking is aggressive. The tutorial teaches you that if you press the heavy attack button immediately after blocking a hit, you unleash a devastating counter swing that deals massive stance damage. It is accompanied by a distinct, satisfying shing sound, like a sword being drawn from a steel scabbard. This mechanic trivializes some of the most annoying enemies in the game, those frenetic, stone-skinned imps that infest the catacombs, for instance. Players who skip the hole often spend their first 20 hours frantically rolling away from dogs and imps, getting chipped to death, unaware that the game gave them a delete button for these enemies 5 minutes into the adventure. The Cave of Knowledge also forces you to understand stealth, crouching in tall grass to deliver a critical backstab. While stealth existed in Sekiro, its implementation here is vital for thinning out enemy encampments before the horns start blowing. The Tarnished who skips the hole charges into the gatefront ruins later on, alerts the entire garrison, and gets turned into a pincushion by 20 crossbowmen. The Tarnished who took the plunge knows to crouch walk through the bushes, silencing the sentries one by one like a medieval Batman, and then, of course, there is the boss of this area. At the end of the tutorial cave, behind a fog wall that makes your heart skip a beat if you're new to the genre, awaits the Soldier of Godric. This encounter has become the stuff of legend, though perhaps not in the way the developers intended. The Soldier of Godric is, objectively, a joke. He is a standard enemy with a slightly larger health bar. He stumbles around with a great sword, telegraphing his swings with the speed of a sloth moving through molasses. He exists solely to let you test out your R1 button. However, the community, in its infinite capacity for sarcasm and shared inside jokes, has elevated this poor grunt to the status of a deity. If you browse the forums or Reddit, you will see terrified whispers about Rick, Soldier of God. Fans debate his power level, jokingly placing him above Malenia, Blade of Miquella, or the final boss of the DLC. They create elaborate fan theories that he is holding back 99% of his power to spare the universe from destruction. This community debate, the ironic deification of the easiest boss in history, serves a social purpose. It bonds players together. It is a shared wink, a way of laughing at the crushing difficulty of the rest of the game by pretending the tutorial boss is the true nightmare. But beneath the memes, there is a genuine tragedy for the player who skips him. By not fighting the Soldier of Godric, you miss that first, essential hit of dopamine. You miss the enemy-felled text flashing across the screen. You enter Limgrave with 0 victories under your belt, fragile and unsure, rather than emerging as the conqueror of the cave. There is also a fascinating bit of obscure lore tied to this specific location that most players miss, even if they do take the plunge. The area is called the Stranded Graveyard, but physically it is connected to a much darker, more ancient structure. If you look at the architecture, the high arches, the statues of robed figures, the distinct stonework, you realise that this tutorial cave is actually the mudroom for the fringe folk hero's grave, which is locked behind a fog wall right next to the tutorial start point. The fringe folk hero's grave is a high-level dungeon filled with poison, spectral banished knights, and a mechanical chariot that runs you over for instant death. The lore implication is brutal. The Cave of Knowledge, where you learn to fight, is literally the trash chute for the hero's grave, where champions are buried. You are practicing your sword swings in the gutter of a mausoleum built for people better than you. The stranded souls mentioned in item descriptions found here are those who washed up on the shore but weren't worthy of the main crypt. They are the rejects, the failures, the ones who couldn't cut it in the Golden Order. By placing the tutorial here, the game is quietly telling you your status in this world. You are essentially grave moss, growing in the shadow of dead heroes. Furthermore, the Soldier of Godric himself tells a story through his presence. Why is a soldier of the golden lineage down here in a cave? The Godric soldiers are usually found guarding storm-swept castles or patrolling roads. His presence suggests that Godric the Grafted, the ruler of Limgrave, is so desperate for power, so paranoid and grasping, that he has sent patrols to the very edges of the continent, to the sewers and the sea caves, hoping to catch newly arrived Tarnished. He is hunting you before you even stand up. The soldier isn't just a tutorial dummy, he is a scout for a graft-hungry demigod, looking for fresh limbs to add to his master's collection. The mistake of skipping the cave is also a mistake of pacing. Elden Ring is a game of rhythm. The Cave of Knowledge sets the tempo. It teaches you that combat is deliberate. Block, wait, counter, crouch, wait, strike. When you skip it, you rush out into the open world with the frantic, panicked rhythm that gets you killed. You haven't attuned yourself to the heartbeat of the game. You're playing a fast-paced action game while the engine is running a tactical RPG simulation. So, if you ever start a new journey, or if you're advising a friend who is taking their first steps, listen to the ghost in the chair. Ignore the instinct that says pits are bad. Jump. The fall won't kill you. Magic gravity prevents it in this one specific instance. And the knowledge you gain is worth its weight in runes. There is no shame in hitting the dummy. The shame lies in facing the Tree Sentinel 10 minutes later and realizing you don't know how to hold your sword with two hands because you were too proud to read the pop-up windows in the basement. The darkness of the cave eventually gives way to a tunnel, and that tunnel leads to the elevator we mentioned earlier. And as you rise, equipped with the knowledge of guard counters and stealth, you feel ready. But the game is cunning. It knows that even with the mechanics mastered, your judgment is still flawed. You will step out into Limgrave, avoid the Sentinel, and then look at your map. Or rather, the lack of one. The world stretches out endlessly to the east and south. And this brings us to the third mistake, one that involves a deceptively easy stroll into a nightmare of red skies and rot. You see a road, you follow it, and suddenly, the sky turns the colour of a fresh bruise, and the music shifts from a gentle hum to a dissonant, screeching horror. So there you are, feeling clever. You have successfully navigated the tutorial, you have sidestepped the golden bully on the horse, and you have perhaps even cleared out a small camp of soldiers near the gatefront ruins. Your confidence is blossoming like a spring flower. You decide to explore the immediate vicinity, wandering south into the murky waters of a Geel lake. You see some ruins, the dragon-burnt ruins to be precise. Ruins mean treasure, you whisper to yourself, employing the impeccable logic that has served you well in every RPG since 1998. You fight off a few giant rats and some shambling nobles. You find a staircase leading down into a dark cellar. At the end of the room, there it is, a treasure chest. It sits there, innocuous and inviting, promising riches, perhaps a new sword or maybe a talisman. You lift the lid, but there is no treasure. There is only smoke. A thick grey fog engulfs your character. The camera zooms in on your tarnished coffin, confused. A message flashes on the screen that strikes fear into the heart of any veteran player, ensnared in a transporter trap. The screen goes black. When the light returns, you're no longer in the sunny, windswept plains of Limgrave. You're in a wooden shack deep underground, surrounded by jagged, glowing crystals. And then you hear it, a wet, clicking sound. You peek out of the shack and see them, the kindred of rot. They look like humanoid prawns made of nightmares and chitin, armed with glaives that shoot homing pest threads. Welcome to the Celia Crystal Tunnel. Welcome to Caelid. This specific transporter trap is perhaps the most cruel and brilliant prank From Software has ever pulled. It flings a level 10 player directly into a level 60 dungeon, located in a region that is essentially Hell's backyard. The mistake here isn't just opening the chest, curiosity is natural after all. The mistake is panic. You see, when you are teleported by a trap, a special debuff is applied to your map. You cannot fast travel. The game greys out all your sites of grace. The only way to remove this restriction is to escape the dungeon and rest at a site of grace in the new world. But the game doesn't tell you this. So thousands of players spawn in the shack, see the prawn miners, try to open their map, see it doesn't work, and assume they are trapped there forever until they fight their way out. They charge the prawns. They die. They respawn in the shack. They charge again. They die again. It becomes a loop of despair, a purgatory of crystals and pest threads. If you manage to sprint past the miners, run, do not fight, never fight, and emerge into the open air, the situation somehow gets worse. You step out onto the banks of the swamp of Aeonia. The sky is not blue, it is a bruised, sickly shade of crimson. The clouds look like clotted blood. The vegetation consists of twisted, calcified fungi and trees that look like they are screaming in agony. The music is no longer the heroic swell of the overworld theme, it is a discordant, screeching violation of the ears, full of high-pitched strings that mimic the sensation of insects crawling under your skin. This is the Caelid Wilds, a region defined by the Scarlet Rot, and wandering here before you're ready is the third great mistake. Even if you didn't take the Teleport Chest Express, you might have simply walked here. To the east of Limgrave, past the Summon Water village, the road turns red. The ground shifts from green grass to dry, cracked earth. A wall of fire, the smouldering wall, marks the border. Many players see this and think, oh, a fire zone, cool. They cross the threshold and are immediately introduced to the local wildlife. Let's talk about the dogs. In Limgrave, the dogs are annoying strays. In Caelid, the dogs are the size of Ford F-150 trucks. They have massive, distended jaws and heads that look far too large for their bodies, giving them the appearance of a Tyrannosaurus Rex in a fur coat. These monstrosities are not just high-level enemies, they are mechanically broken in a way that feels personal. For a long time after launch, there was a specific bug with the bleed dogs where their bite hitbox would register dozens of times in a single frame, instantly deleting a player with 40 vigour. While that has been patched, the trauma remains, and if the dogs don't get you, the birds will. The giant crows of Caelid are arguably the most terrifying standard enemies in the game. They perch on the gnarled branches, looking like roadkill that refuse to die, and when they spot you, they engage in a tumbling, beak-slamming assault that can chase you halfway across the map. The mistake of lingering in Caelid is a failure to read the room. The game is screaming at you visually and audibly, you should not be here. Yet, the stubborn Tarnished thinks, maybe I can find a cool weapon. And you can, to be fair. The Meteorite Staff, an essential tool for early game sorcerers, is located in the swamps nearby. But the cost is often your sanity. The lore behind this hellscape is some of the most tragic in the entire mythos, and understanding it makes the region even more horrifying. Caelid wasn't always a biological wasteland. It was once a normal region, likely similar to Limgrave. But during the Shattering War, a cataclysmic battle took place here between General Radahn and Malenia the Severed. Radahn, the Star Scourge, was the mightiest of the demigods, a giant who mastered gravity magic to ride his beloved scrawny horse. Malenia, an unmatched swordswoman, was cursed from birth with the Scarlet Rot, an outer god's influence that eats away at life. In the cinematic trailer we see the moment Caelid died. To match Radahn's strength, Malenia abandoned her pride and removed the unalloyed gold needle that held the rot at bay. She bloomed. The Scarlet Aeonia exploded, unleashing a biological nuke that instantly corrupted the entire continent. The rot isn't just poison, it's a cycle of stagnation and rebirth found in decay. The fungi you see everywhere aren't just plants, they are the result of the land trying to process the rot. An obscure lore tidbit that many players miss involves the pests, or the kindred of rot you met in the mine. These creatures are not native to the lands between in the traditional sense. Item descriptions, specifically on the pest's glaive, suggest they were born from the rot itself. They worship Malenia not as a warrior, but as a mother figure, the goddess of rot. They believe the decay is a holy cycle. When you are fighting them, you aren't fighting monsters. You are fighting the religious pilgrims of a new gross ecosystem. Furthermore, deep in the swamp you can find the commander's standard weapon dropped by Commander O'Neill. If you read the description, it reveals that O'Neill was a commander in Malenia's army who remained in the swamp, raising the banner even as the rot consumed him and his men, keeping their spirits bound to the location of the Great Bloom. He is a ghost haunting the site of a war crime. The community has spent years debating the morality of this event. Was Malenia justified? She was fighting to a stalemate and used her only option to survive. Or was she a sore loser who nuked a country because she couldn't beat Radahn in a fair duel? This debate, Radahn versus Malenia, is one of the most heated in the fandom. Team Radahn points to the devastation of Caelid as proof of Malenia's villainy. Team Malenia argues that war is war. and Radahn was holding the literal stars hostage, stopping fate itself. Regardless of who you side with, the result is that you, the player, have to deal with giant dogs that deal 800 damage per bite. The trap of Caelid is also a trap of progression. Because the game is open, you can go there, but doing so creates a warped sense of difficulty. If you spend 3 hours bashing your head against Caelid enemies at level 20, finally manage to scrape together some runes, and then return to Limgrave, the rest of the early game feels trivial. You rob yourself of the intended curve. You become the over-leveled monster bullying the Godric soldiers. So, if you find yourself surrounded by red skies and T-Rex dogs, take a breath. Open your map once you're outside. Fast travel back to the first step. Caelid will wait. It isn't going anywhere. In fact, it's slowly festering and getting worse. The mistake is thinking you have to conquer it now. Leave the rot to the demigods for a while. You have a date with a much greener, albeit still dangerous countryside. But let's assume you escape Caelid. You return to the safety of Limgrave, shaken but alive. You realise you need to get stronger. You need to level up. You sit at a site of grace. Melina appears to turn your runes into strength, and you look at the stat screen. There are so many numbers: vigour, mind, endurance, strength, dexterity, intelligence, faith, arcane. You look at your sword. You want it to hit harder. You want to see big yellow numbers when you smack a troll. So you dump your points into strength or dexterity. You ignore the top stat, vigour, because if I don't get hit, I don't need health, right? And thus, you commit the fourth, and arguably most mathematically fatal mistake of the entire game. You decide to become a glass cannon in a world full of hammers. The glow of the Site of Grace is one of the few true comforts in the lands between. It is a campfire in a world of cold stone and colder intent. You sit there, the golden moats drifting around you, and you summon Melina. She kneels, offering her hand, and the level up menu appears. This is the moment of creation, the moment where you define who your Tarnished will be. And it is here, in the quiet safety of the menu screen, that the fourth mistake takes root. A mistake driven by greed, hubris, and a fundamental misunderstanding of how Elden Ring calculates survival. You look at your stats. You see strength, dexterity, intelligence, faith. You see the R-Armament 1 damage number on the right side of the screen. When you put a point into strength, that number goes up. It turns blue. It is a visual reward, a promise that your next swing will carve a deeper trench into your enemy's health bars. Then you look at vigour. Putting a point there increases your HP. It's boring. It's defensive. It doesn't make things explode faster. And a voice in the back of your head, the voice of the glass cannon, whispers a dangerous lie. If you don't get hit, you don't need health. Just dodge better. Invest in damage. End the fight in 10 seconds, and you won't need to worry about survival. So you pump your offensive stats. You walk around Limgrave with 12 vigour, wielding a giant sword that you can barely lift, feeling like a god because you can one-shot a goblin. But Elden Ring is playing a long game with you, and the math is rigged in favour of the house. The mistake of the glass cannon is ignoring the vigour check. This is a term coined by the community, often used by invaders who hunt other players. It refers to a specific interaction where an enemy lands a single standard attack, and the player's health bar instantly evaporates. In previous From Software titles, having low health was manageable because enemies dealt moderate damage relative to your pool. In Elden Ring, the damage scaling is exponential. By the time you reach the mid-game areas like the Altus Plateau or Leyndell, regular knights are hitting for 800-900 damage per swing. If your total health is 600 because you wanted to cast a slightly shinier glintstone pebble, you're not playing an action RPG anymore, you're playing a survival horror game where a stiff breeze causes "you died" to appear on the screen. The core mechanical fact that players miss is how the vigour stat scales. In most RPGs, stats have diminishing returns immediately. In Elden Ring, vigour actually has increasing returns up to a certain point. The difference between level 30 vigour and level 40 vigour is massive. It is the difference between having 994 HP and 1450 HP. That jump is almost a 50% increase in survivability for 10 levels of investment. The game is practically begging you to hit 40 vigour as a baseline, yet we ignore it. We crave the big damage numbers. We build characters that are like exquisite, crystal vases, beautiful, powerful, and capable of shattering if someone closes a door too hard. There is a profound and disturbing piece of obscure lore that perfectly mirrors this player behaviour, found in the history of the primeval sorcerers. If you pursue the questline of Sorceress Selen, or dig into the item descriptions of the primal glintstone blade, you uncover the philosophy of the ancient astrologers. They believed that the stars were the true source of power, and that the body was merely a vessel. To reach the heights of sorcery, to achieve the primeval current, they would literally slice open their own chests and replace their beating hearts with glintstone. The talisman known as the primal glintstone blade reduces your maximum HP significantly, but reduces the FP cost of spells. The description reads, "The old sorcerers would slice open their hearts with these blades to infuse a primal glintstone into their very soul, and thus did they die." When you play a glass cannon, ignoring vigour to pump intelligence or faith, you are unwittingly role-playing these doomed fanatics. You are hollowing out your own vitality to chase the stars. You're making the same bargain the primeval sorcerers made, trading life for power, and just like them, you usually end up as a crystallized husk, broken on the floor of a dungeon. The game's lore explicitly frames this pursuit of pure power without vitality as a form of madness, a violation of the natural order that leads to a gruesome end. Selen herself, the greatest proponent of this path, meets a fate that is, well, let's just say it's one of the most horrific body horror transformations in the game, ending up as a ball of screaming stone faces. That is the ultimate destiny of the glass cannon. The community debate around this is fierce and often hilarious. On Reddit and Twitter, you will see clips of hosts, the player summoning help, engaging a boss. The summon, usually a tanky veteran, buffs up and prepares for battle. The host runs in, casts one impressive-looking spell, gets clipped by the boss's pinky toe during a turnaround animation, and instantly dies. The comment sections are flooded with level vigour memes. There is a philosophical divide between the don't get hit elitists, who claim that armour and health are crutches for bad players, and the stat check realists, who understand that human error is inevitable and that lag exists. The reality is that Elden Ring is designed to trade blows. Bosses have combos that are 10 moves long. They have area of effect attacks that cover the entire arena. They have input reading capabilities that punish healing. If you cannot survive one mistake, you have to play perfectly for 5 minutes straight. And unless you are a speedrunner with thousands of hours of practice, you will not play perfectly. You will mistime a roll, you will get greedy, you will get stuck on a piece of geometry. If you have 40 vigour, that mistake costs you a flask sip. If you have 15 vigour, that mistake costs you the entire run. This mistake leads to a distinct type of frustration. The glass cannon player often complains that the game is cheap or unfair. They scream that the fire giant deals too much damage, or that the Astal boss fight is impossible. But the game isn't being unfair, the game is dealing appropriate damage for the area, and the player has brought a level 1 body to a level 100 fight. They have neglected the most important weapon in their arsenal, their own resilience. It is a hard habit to break. We are conditioned to love offense. Defense is invisible. You only notice it when it fails. But offense is flashy. However, the most successful Tarnished are the ones who understand balance. They understand that a dead DPS deals 0 DPS. They learn to love the long red bar that stretches across the top of the screen. So, if you're currently running a build with 60 intelligence and 12 vigour, and you're wondering why the game feels like a nightmare of one-shots and frustration, take a trip to the woman who can birth you anew. We'll get to her later. Reallocate those points. Sacrifice a little bit of that damage. You won't miss the extra 20 points of attack rating, but you will definitely appreciate being able to stand back up after a dragon breathes fire on you. But let's say you have leveled your vigour. You're sturdy. You're exploring the world, feeling confident. You stumble upon a merchant, perhaps a nomadic trader playing a melancholic tune on a stringed instrument, or a white-faced man standing near the first step. And here, in a moment of boredom or curiosity, you make the 5th mistake. You let your intrusive thoughts win. You wonder, can I kill him? And you swing your sword. The consequences of this momentary lapse in judgment are far-reaching, irreversible, and steeped in a profound sense of guilt that the game is all too happy to exploit. There is a specific kind of silence that falls over the world of Elden Ring after you murder a friendly non-playable character. It is not the silence of peace, it is the silence of something missing, a hole punched in the fabric of the game's reality by your own impulsive violence. We have all been there. You step out of the grave, you see the vast world, and you encounter the first person who doesn't immediately try to eat your face. For many, this is White Mask Vare, the soft-spoken, unsettling man standing right next to the first step site of grace. For others, it is Merchant Caelid, the Santa Claus-looking figure warming his hands by a fire in the Church of Ella. And for reasons that range from petty annoyance to chaotic curiosity, you decide to kill them. This is the fifth great mistake, murdering the first friendly face. The catalyst for this violence is almost always White Mask Vare. He is designed to test your ego. You approach him, expecting a tutorial or a word of encouragement, and instead he hits you with the most iconic insult in modern gaming. Unfortunately for you, you are maidenless. It is a line delivered with such dripping condescension, such polite pity, that it feels less like in-game dialogue and more like a personal attack on your dating life. The gamer instinct flares up. I'm not maidenless, you think, drawing your unupgraded club. I'm the protagonist, and you are just an NPC. So you swing, and immediately things go wrong. Vare does not cower, he does not die in one hit. He pulls out a weapon that looks like a bouquet of steel roses and proceeds to engage you in a fight that you are statistically unlikely to win at level 1. He has a quick step dodge, he inflicts bleed buildup, which takes a percentage of your health instantly, and he heals himself. Suddenly, the tutorial area has become a desperate boss fight against a surgeon in a white mask. If you die, he doesn't reset, he stays hostile. Every time you respawn at the first step, he's there, waiting to murder you again. You have turned your spawn point into a kill box, but let's say you win. You manage to defeat him through sheer stubbornness. He dies with a curse on his lips, leaving you with 6 measly, festering bloody fingers and a sense of hollow victory. You have silenced the man who insulted you, but the price you pay is staggering. By killing Vare, you lock yourself out of one of the most significant questlines in the game. Vare is your ticket to early game power. If you follow his quest, he gives you the Pureblood Knight's Medal, an item that teleports you directly to Mogwyn Palace. This is a high-level area that contains the best rune farming spot in the entire game, the famous Palace Approach Ledge Road, where players can earn millions of runes in minutes by shooting a bird off a cliff. By killing Vare in a fit of pique, you deny yourself access to this area until the very end of the game, forcing you to grind runes the hard way for dozens of hours. You also miss out on the white mask he wears, which is the best in-slot helmet for bleed builds. You essentially traded a Ferrari for a moment of petty satisfaction. The community debate surrounding Vare is a testament to From Software's writing. He is universally hated yet universally needed. The forums are filled with players asking, "I killed the guy who called me maidenless. Is my save ruined?" The veterans sigh and say, "Yes, restart." It is a harsh lesson in restraint. Just because you can kill everyone you meet doesn't mean you should. But there is a darker, more tragic version of this mistake. Some players, perhaps looking for a different kind of item, turn their blade on Merchant Caelid. Caelid is the definition of harmless. He sits by his fire, his mule standing patiently beside him, and offers to sell you a crafting kit and a torch. He is polite. He warns you about the dangers ahead. Yet there is a certain type of player, the murder hobo, who sees him as a loot piñata. They attack. Caelid begs for his life. "Please stop," he cries. His mule might even try to kick you in defense. It is a visceral, ugly encounter. When he dies, he fades into dust, leaving behind his bell bearing. Mechanically, the game has a failsafe. You can take this bell bearing to the Twin Maiden husks at the Round Table Hold, allowing you to buy his items even after his death. This leads some cynical players to argue that killing merchants is optimal because it consolidates all shops into one location. But the game punishes you with guilt. Every time you buy a crafting kit from the silent dried-up husks at the Hold, you are reminded that you murdered a friendly traveller just to save 5 minutes of fast travel time. The obscure lore implications of killing Caelid are profound and terrifying, revealing that your act of murder is actually part of a much larger ancient genocide. Caelid is one of the nomadic merchants. If you read the descriptions of the nomadic merchant's finery or piece together the environmental storytelling later in the game, you discover the horrific history of his people. The merchants were once a great caravan, a thriving tribe. However, they were accused of heretical beliefs, specifically worshipping the Three Fingers and the Frenzied Flame. The Golden Order, in its benevolence, rounded up the entire caravan and buried them alive deep beneath the capital city of Lendel. If you venture deep into the subterranean shunning grounds, you find this tomb. It is a mass grave of thousands of merchants piled atop one another in a dark stone cathedral. But they aren't all dead. Some are still playing their instruments, bowing maddening tunes into the darkness. The lore reveals that their collective despair and rage is what actually summoned the frenzied flame into the world. They cursed the world that buried them. When you kill Caelid, you are not just killing a shopkeeper, you are finishing the work of the Golden Order's Inquisition. You're extinguishing one of the few survivors of an ethnic cleansing who managed to stay sane and kind despite his people's history. Caelid hints at this if you speak to him, mentioning his people are deeply unforgiving. He is trying to live a quiet life in a world that wants him dead, and then you show up, the supposed hero, and cut him down for a laugh. It transforms the tone of your playthrough from a heroic journey into a villain origin story. There is a mechanic called absolution that many players discover too late. At the Church of Vows in Liurnia, presided over by Miriel, Pastor of Vows, affectionately known as Turtle Pope, you can use an item called Celestial Dew to wash away your sins. If you attack an NPC and they become hostile, you can use the dew to calm them down. You don't need to kill your friends, the game whispers. But here is the catch. Absolution works on aggression, not death. It cannot resurrect the dead. If you killed Varé, he is gone. If you killed Caelid, he is dust. The game allows for forgiveness, but it does not allow for undoing the finality of death. This mistake, murdering the friendly faces, is often a hangover from other open-world games where NPCs are immortal or irrelevant. In Skyrim, essential characters just kneel down when beaten. In Elden Ring, everyone is mortal. The game trusts you with the agency to destroy your own world. It hands you a loaded gun and says, do what you want, and when you shoot the quest giver in the foot, the game doesn't reload the save. It simply nods and says, okay, figure it out. So, you stand there in the Church of Ella, the fire crackling, the donkey gone, the merchant gone. The wind whistles through the holes in the roof. You have your crafting kit, you have your bloody finger. But the world feels a little colder, a little emptier. You realise that in a land where almost everything wants to kill you, destroying the few things that don't is a special kind of madness. You resolve to be better. You resolve to protect the next friendly face you see. But as you equip your armour, trying to prepare for the dangers ahead, you make the next mistake. You look at that heavy knight armour you found, or perhaps the drops from the soldiers you killed. You see the high defence numbers. This will keep me safe, you think. You put it all on. The helmet, the chest piece, the greaves, the heavy shield. You feel like a tank. You feel invincible. Then you try to dodge. Your character hits the ground with the grace of a sack of wet cement. The controller vibrates with a heavy, sickening thud. You stand up slowly, painfully. You have entered the realm of the heavy load. You have become a victim of the sixth mistake, compromising your mobility for a false sense of security and dooming yourself to be caught by every sword, swing, claw swipe, and dragon breath the game has to throw at you. The sound of the heavy load roll is one of the most distinctive audio cues in the entire medium of video games. It is not a swoosh, it is not a slide, it is a wet metallic kerchunk followed by a groan of physical exertion that sounds like someone trying to lift a refrigerator while wearing a suit made of cast iron skillets. It is the sound of failure. It is the sound of the sixth great mistake, the thunderous thud of the fat roll. You're standing there, clad in the full knight set you bought from the Twin Maiden husks, or perhaps a mishmash of Godric soldier greaves and a heavy chainmail chest piece. You look formidable. You look like a walking fortress. You have observed the high defense stats, the physical negation, the slash resistance, and you have concluded, quite logically, that higher numbers mean you will live longer. You enter a boss arena, perhaps facing the burial watchdog in a catacomb. The watchdog rises, its stone sword raised high. You instinctively press the dodge button, expecting your character to gracefully weave through the attack like water flowing around a rock. Instead, your Tarnished performs a maneuver that can best be described as a tactical faceplant. You drop to your knees, your shoulders hit the dirt, and you sluggishly heave yourself back to a standing position. By the time you are halfway up, the watchdog's sword has already descended. You take the full force of the hit. You panic. You try to roll again. Kerchunk. You get hit again. You have entered the death spiral of the fat roll, a loop where your evasion is slower than the enemy's attack cadence. The mechanics behind this tragedy are rooted in the equip load stat, a number that many new players ignore until it ruins their lives. Elden Ring divides your mobility into thresholds. If your equipped weight, weapons, armor and talismans is below 30% of your maximum capacity, you have a light roll, which travels far and recovers instantly. Between 30% and 70%, you have the medium roll, the gold standard of combat. But the moment you cross 70%, even by a fraction of a decimal, you enter heavy load territory. The mistake here is a fundamental misunderstanding of how defense works in a From Software game. In most RPGs, defense is passive. You stand there and mitigate damage. In Elden Ring, defense is active. The primary layer of survival is not your armor, it is your iframes, or invincibility frames. When you dodge, for a fraction of a second, you are intangible. The game code says you do not exist. Attacks pass right through you. When you fat roll, you significantly reduce these invincibility frames, and more critically, you drastically increase the recovery frames, the time you're stuck standing up, unable to move or block. By wearing armor that is too heavy for your endurance stat, you're essentially trading the ability to be immortal for a slightly thicker shirt. You're prioritizing damage mitigation, taking 20% less damage, from a hit you shouldn't have taken, over damage avoidance, taking 0 damage because you weren't there. This mechanical reality sparked one of the fiercest debates in the community during the game's launch window, the poise controversy. Veterans of Dark Souls 1 remembered a mechanic where wearing heavy armor made you unstoppable. You could walk through enemy attacks without flinching, drinking flasks in their faces. This was poise. In Elden Ring, players donned the heavier sets, the Banished Knight armor, the Tree Sentinel gear, expecting to tank hits. But they found that even a lowly rat or a dog could stagger them out of an attack animation. The forums were on fire with threads titled "Poise is broken" or "Heavy armor is useless." The community eventually cracked the code, realizing that poise in Elden Ring is a threshold system that resets quickly and that hyper armor on large weapons matters more. But this debate highlighted the trap. Players were obsessing over the passive benefits of armor while neglecting the active penalty of weight. They wanted to be unmovable objects in a game designed for unstoppable forces. There is a legendary figure in the lore who embodies the extreme end of this philosophy, a character whose equipment tells the story of the heavy load done right, or perhaps done obsessively. This is Great Horned Tragoth. If you follow Patch's questline or participate in the chaotic festival of combat against Starscourge Radon, you can summon him. Tragoth wears the Bull Goat set, the heaviest armor in the base game. It is a hideous, bulbous suit of plate covered in giant horns. The obscure lore found in the description of the Bull Goat talisman and his armor reveals that Tragoth is a knight of assistance. He has travelled the lands between specifically to throw himself in front of danger to save others. The horns on his armor aren't just decoration, they're grounded to the earth, symbolically and perhaps magically rooting him in place to grant immense stability. Tragoth is the only one who makes the fat roll lifestyle work, largely because he has an absurd amount of endurance and wields a giant hammer. But the tragedy of Tragoth is implied in his role. He is a helper, never a lord. He exists to be a meat shield for others. By mimicking his heavy load without his specific build or purpose, you are cosplaying as a side character in your own story. The fat roll mistake also leads to a harsh lesson in Fashion Souls, or as it is known in this iteration, Elden Bling. Over time, players realise that the difference in damage negation between a glorious, heavy set of plate mail and a stylish robe is often negligible compared to the penalty of movement. If a boss hits you for 1000 damage, the heavy armour might reduce it to 800. If you have 700 health, you are dead either way. This realisation leads to the naked master phenomenon. We have all seen the legend of Let Me Solo Her, the player who helped thousands defeat millennia wearing nothing but a jar on his head. This is the antithesis of the fat roll mistake. It is the acceptance that in the face of god-killing power, armour is an illusion, speed is truth. But for the average player, the solution is not nudity, it is moderation. It is the painful act of opening the equipment menu and taking off the helmet, or swapping the heavy gauntlets for leather gloves, or, if you are truly attached to the look of a heavy knight, spending your precious level up points on endurance. There is a subtle, almost ASMR-like quality to the inventory management screen when you're fixing this mistake. You unequip the heavy chest piece. The heavy load text in the corner flashes and changes to med load. You close the menu. You press the dodge button. Your character performs a crisp, swift roll, tumbling through the grass with the grace of a gymnast. It feels like taking off a weighted vest after a long run. The world feels lighter, the controls feel responsive. You're no longer fighting the controller, you are fighting the enemy. However, removing the armour leaves you feeling exposed. You look at your character, perhaps now wearing mismatched pants and a shirt that doesn't quite fit the aesthetic, all for the sake of the medium role. You feel vulnerable, and in this vulnerability you realise you need help. You remember that little blue bell the witch gave you? Or wait, did you ever get the bell? You check your inventory, it's not there. You've been running solo this whole time. This brings us to the 7th mistake, a blunder of logistics and missed appointments. You assumed the game would just hand you your most powerful tools, but Elden Ring requires you to be in the right place at the right time. You have been fighting alone, while an entire army of spectral allies sits in a void, waiting for a summoner who never learned how to ring the bell. You have left the spirit silent, and the silence is deafening. So there you are, rolling with the newfound grace of a medium load, your armour stripped back to sensible leather and chainmail. You feel agile, you feel responsive, but you also feel undeniably small. The Lands Between is a colossal place, filled with enemies that often come in packs or tower over you like skyscrapers made of meat and malice. You enter a ruin, perhaps the gatefront, and find yourself surrounded. A horn blows, knights descend, you dodge one, block another, but a third spears you from behind. As the screen fades to grey, you might find yourself wishing you had a friend, a backup, a decoy, and the tragedy is, you probably have an entire army in your pocket, but you never learned how to call them. This is the 7th great mistake, leaving the spirit bell ringing silent. The spirit calling bell is arguably the single most powerful tool in a Tarnished's arsenal. It allows you to summon spectral allies, spirit ashes, to fight alongside you in designated areas. These aren't just pets, they're tanks, DPS machines and distractions that break the AI of difficult bosses. Yet, a shocking number of players miss the bell entirely in the early game, or worse, acquire it and refuse to use it out of a misplaced sense of honour. The acquisition of the bell is one of those blink and you'll miss it moments that From Software loves to hide. To get it naturally, you must return to the Church of Ele, the very first shopkeeper's location, at night, specifically after you have received your horse torrent. If you do this, you find the merchant Caelid asleep, assuming you didn't murder him in Section 5. Sitting on the ruined wall, bathed in spectral blue light, is a witch calling herself Renna. She's mysterious, possessing 4 arms and a voice that sounds like crushed velvet. She hands you the bell and the lone wolf ashes, remarking with a touch of skepticism, "I doubt you could even command them." The mistake happens because most players don't go back. They push forward to Stormvale Castle. They get whisked away to the Round Table Hold. If you miss the meeting with Renna, who is actually Ranni the Witch, a demigod in hiding, the bell eventually shows up for sale at the Twin Maiden Husks in the Round Table Hold. But because the game doesn't tell you this, many players assume they just haven't unlocked the summoning feature yet. They play for 30, 40 hours, fighting Radon and Renala completely solo, wondering why the game feels so oppressive. They are playing Pokemon without ever throwing a Pokeball. But even among those who have the bell, there is a second, more insidious mistake, the refusal to upgrade. You see, Spirit Ashes have health bars and damage stats just like you. A +0 lone wolf squad might be helpful in Limgrave, but in the Altus Plateau they will evaporate in a single hit. To make them viable, you need to engage with spirit tuning. This mechanic is locked behind the questline of Roderica, a terrified young woman. You find shivering in a shack on the road to Stormvale. Roderica is the source of one of the most touching and obscure bits of lore in the game. When you meet her, she is craven, paralysed by fear. She tells you her men have all been grafted and she is left alone. If you help her find her confidence and move her to the Round Table Hold, she eventually discovers a hidden talent. She can hear the voices of the spirits. She becomes a spirit tuner. The relationship between Roderica and the smith, Master Hugh, is a narrative gem that many players gloss over while mashing the upgrade button. Hugh is a misbegotten, a prisoner bound to the hold to forge a weapon capable of slaying a god. He is gruff and terrified of the queen, Marika, who imprisoned him. Yet he takes Roderica under his wing. He recognises her gift. The obscure detail here is found in the dialogue and the description of the crimson hood she leaves behind. Roderica was likely royalty, sent across the sea to be a sacrifice, chrysalids for the grafting process. She escaped her fate but felt guilty for surviving while her men died. By tuning spirits, she is essentially finding a way to care for the souls of those who died violently. She isn't just making your jellyfish stronger, she is counselling the dead, soothing their trauma so they can fight with purpose rather than blind rage. It turns a mechanical upgrade system into a form of spectral therapy. When you ignore spirit tuning, you are ignoring this beautiful arc and you are leaving your allies weak. A plus 110 Mimic Tier or a plus 110 Black Knife Tiche is not just a helper, they are a co-protagonist. And this brings us to the great community debate, the easy mode controversy. Since launch, a vocal subset of the Elden Ring community has argued that using Spirit Ashes is cheating. They claim that the game is only true if beaten solo, melee only, no summons. They look at players who use the Mimic Tier, a slime that transforms into a copy of the player, and sneer. You didn't beat Malenia, they say. Your clone beat Malenia while you watched. This debate ignores the fundamental design of Elden Ring. Unlike Dark Souls, which was largely designed for 1v1 duels, Elden Ring throws gank squads at you. The Valiant Gargoyles, the Godskin Duo, the Commander O'Neill fights. These are encounters designed with split aggro in mind. The bosses have relentless combos that leave almost no windows for punishment unless their attention is divided. The Spirit Ashes are the balancer. The game expects you to use them. Furthermore, the Mimic Tier specifically has generated endless memes and discussions. Before it was nerfed in an early patch, the Mimic Tier was arguably the strongest entity in the lore. It could heal itself, use infinite items, and had massive health. It led to the hilarious and humbling realization for many players. My AI clone is better at this game than I am. Watching your mimic perfectly dodge a waterfowl dance while you panic roll into a wall is a special kind of ego death. But the mistake of leaving the bell silent goes beyond difficulty. It changes the feel of the world. Elden Ring is a game about the aftermath of a shattered order. The Spirit Ashes are remnants of that past. Ancient knights, rot-worshipping pests, jars, jellyfish. When you summon them, you're bringing history into the fight. Take the jellyfish, Aurelia. She's a starter summon, weak and floaty. But if you read the item description, you learn she is a little girl searching for her sister. Later in the game, at the Stargazer's ruins, you can actually reunite her with her sister, triggering a unique interaction where they spin together and vanish to see the stars. If you never use the bell, if you never upgrade Aurelia, you miss this moment of pure, transcendent beauty in a world of horror. You also miss the tactical joy of the Pokemon trainer build. There is a deep strategy in matching the right spirit to the right boss. Fighting a mage, summon the Crystallian, who is immune to most magic and stagger. Fighting a fast, aggressive beast, summon the Great Shield soldiers, 5 little guys who surround the enemy and bonk them with shields, effectively stun-locking them. Ignoring this system is like playing a card game and refusing to use half the deck because you think the art is too colourful. So, if you are struggling, if you feel the weight of the world crushing your solo character, ring the bell, listen for that spectral chime, watch the blue mist form into a shape. You are a lord in the making, and a lord does not fight alone. A lord commands. Whether it's a pack of wolves, a headless knight, or a giant rat, these are your subjects. Let them serve you. However, as you embrace the collector's mindset, gathering every spirit ash you can find, you likely fall into the next trap. You start picking up everything, not just ashes but flowers, mushrooms, butterfly wings, rocks. You become a vacuum cleaner for the lands between. You look at your inventory and see hundreds of materials. I'll use these later, you tell yourself. I'll craft some bombs for the next boss. But you won't. You will never use them. You will succumb to the 8th mistake, the paralysis of hoarding. You will play for 100 hours and never throw a single pot, never eat a single piece of exalted flesh, and never craft a single perfume, turning the intricate crafting system into a digital landfill of wasted potential. We return now to the quiet, contemplative safety of the menu screen. But this time, we're not looking at stats. We're looking at the inventory tab, specifically the crafting materials section. It is a scrolling list of madness. You have 999 Roa fruit. You have hundreds of herba plants. You have a collection of butterflies that would make a Victorian entomologist weep with envy. Smouldering butterflies, nascent butterflies, Aeonian butterflies. You have rocks, moss, mushrooms, and bits of monsters. land octopus ovaries, beast liver, human bone shards. You're walking around the lands between like a sentient compost heap, carrying the biological slurry of an entire continent in your pockets. And yet, in the heat of battle, when the boss is at 10% health and you are out of flasks, do you open your crafting menu? Do you throw a fire pot? Do you eat a piece of exalted flesh to boost your physical damage? No. You die with a pocket full of miracles because you are saving them for a rainy day. This is the 8th great mistake, the paralysis of hoarding. It is the refusal to engage with the crafting kit, a system designed to smooth out the difficulty spikes because you are terrified of wasting resources. The psychology behind this is deeply rooted in the history of the RPG genre. We have been conditioned by games like Final Fantasy to hoard our mega elixirs because there might be a harder boss later, but Elden Ring is different. The game floods you with resources. The bushes respawn every time you rest at a site of grace. The world is infinite. The only finite resource is your patience, and you're spending it lavishly by refusing to use the tools the game provides. The most tragic misunderstanding within this mistake involves the cracked pot mechanic. Early in the game, you can buy a crafting kit and several cracked pots from Merchant Caelid. Many players look at these items, craft a single fire pot, throw it at a soldier, and then see the number of pots in their inventory decrease. They panic. They think, I only have 3 pots left, I better save them. Here is the core fact that changes everything. The cracked pots are not the bombs. They are the containers for the bombs. They are, essentially, magical, reusable Tupperware. When you throw a fire pot and it explodes against a troll's face, the pot itself magically teleports back into your inventory, empty and ready to be refilled. You never lose the pot, you only lose the mushrooms and flowers inside it. Once you realise this, that you have an infinite supply of grenades as long as you pick flowers, the game changes. You stop seeing enemies as threats and start seeing them as targets for your pyromania. The crafting system is also the answer to some of the game's most unfair fights. The community learned this the hard way with the Godskin Duo, a notorious boss fight in the crumbling Fair Missoula that involves fighting 2 fast, hard-hitting enemies simultaneously. For months, forums were filled with rage. Then, the sleep pot meta emerged. Players realised that the Godskins have a crippling weakness to the sleep status effect. One well-placed sleep pot knocks them out cold for a significant duration, turning an impossible 2v1 brawl into a manageable series of 1v1 executions. The crafting system wasn't flavour text, it was the intended puzzle solution. Yet, how many players smashed their controllers against that wall because they refused to use the purple lily sitting in their bag? There is a fascinating and somewhat dark layer of obscure lore hidden within the crafting menu, specifically regarding the perfumes. As you explore, you find items like the Perfumer's Cookbook and meet enemies called Depraved Perfumers. These aren't just cosmetic items, they are powerful buffs and area of effect weapons. The lore reveals that perfumers were originally apothecaries and healers in the Age of the Erdtree. The aromatics they brewed were medicinal, designed to treat the impurities of body and mind. However, during the Shattering War their role twisted. They were conscripted into the armies. The healing scents were modified into poisons, acids and explosives. The item description of the Depraved Perfumer robe tells us, the embroidery on the apron is a curse against the Erdtree. These perfumers have abandoned their oaths and now use their art for depravity. One of the most chilling connections is to a character named Omen Killer Rollo. You can find his spirit ash, if you didn't leave your bell silent. The description reveals that Rollo was once a famous perfumer. He was a healer. But to hunt the Omen, cursed beings born with horns, he inhaled a physic that stripped him of his emotions and embarked on a brutal crusade. The very first Omen killer, the terrifying boss with the dual machetes, was a doctor who got high on his own supply to numb his conscience so he could commit genocide. When you craft a spark aromatic or an uplifting aromatic, you're tapping into this dark history of weaponized medicine. You're using the tools of a fallen order that turned healing into hurting. The community debate on crafting often centres on the tedium versus immersion axis. Purists argue that stopping to pick flowers breaks the flow of combat and exploration. They mock the crafting survival elements as unnecessary bloat. I came to fight dragons, not to be a gardener, they say. On the other side, the Batman players argue that preparation is part of the skill gap. If you walk into a poison swamp without crafting neutralizing boluses, you deserve to die. It is a clash between action game fans and RPG fans. The action fans want to win with reflexes, the RPG fans want to win with logistics. But the Hoarder's mistake is not just about combat utility, it is about joy. There is a tactile pleasure in the crafting animations, the way your character kneels, grinds the herbs, and produces a glowing item. It connects you to the world. When you eat a pickled turtleneck to boost your stamina recovery, you're engaging with the local cuisine. Even if the implications of eating the lovable turtles are horrific, a fact the community frequently overlooks in favour of the stamina buff. When you use soft cotton to silence your footsteps, you're interacting with the physics of the game engine. By ignoring crafting, you are playing a flatter, less texture-rich version of Elden Ring. You're ignoring the Witcher fantasy of preparing oils and bombs for a specific hunt. You're relying solely on your sword, which is fine, until you meet an enemy that is resistant to slash damage, at which point a holy water pot would have solved all your problems. So, open your inventory. Look at those materials. That Trina's lily is rare, yes, but it does nothing sitting in your pocket. That living jar shard is gross, but it makes your pots hit harder. Use them, throw them, eat them. The game will give you more. You're not saving them for Elden Ring 2. You're saving them for a moment that is happening right now as a rune bear charges at you at max speed. And speaking of charging threats, all this preparation, the levelling, the armour decisions, the crafting, eventually leads to a specific geographic bottleneck. You cannot wander Limgrave forever. Eventually you must head north, up the storm-swept hill, toward the massive castle gates. You feel ready. You have your medium roll, your spirit wolves, and maybe even a few fire pots. But you're about to walk into the 9th mistake, a rite of passage that has humbled millions. You're rushing to the main story boss before you have truly finished your breakfast. You're about to meet Margit and he has a cane with your name on it. The wind howls louder as you ascend. You leave the green pastures of Limgrave behind, trudging up the storm-swept hill where the trees are bent permanently sideways by the gale. The soldiers here are tougher, the trolls are angrier, and the path narrows into a choke point that feels ominous. Ahead looms the massive crumbling archway of Stormvale Castle. The guidance of grace, those golden rays on your map and in the world, have been pointing you here relentlessly. Go this way, the game seems to say. This is the story, this is the path. So, you listen. You walk through the tunnel. You step into a bridge area littered with the swords and spears of fallen warriors. A cutscene triggers. A figure leaps down from the ramparts. A towering, ragged man with a wooden staff, a cloak made of rags, and a face hidden by a mass of horns. He looks at you with weary contempt. Foul Tarnished, he sneers, in search of the Elden Ring, emboldened by the flame of ambition. He is Margit, the fell omen. And fighting him right now is the 9th great mistake. Margit is widely considered one of the most brutal first bosses in From Software history. In Dark Souls, the first boss is usually a lumbering demon you can circle strafe. Margit is a hyper-agile, magic-wielding martial artist who reads your inputs like he's looking over your shoulder. When you rush him straight from the tutorial, likely around level 15 or 20 with a +1 weapon, you're walking into a meat grinder. The mistake lies in misinterpreting the guidance of grace. The golden rays show you where you eventually need to go, not where you currently can survive. They are a compass, not a difficulty curve. The fight itself is a masterclass in psychological warfare. Margit is designed to punish the habits you brought from other games. He has delayed attacks. He raises his cane, holds it, holds it, holds it. And just as you panic roll, he slams it down to catch you at the end of your animation. It is a rhythm disruption. Even worse is his input reading. If you back away to heal, the game's AI detects the button press for the flask. Before the bottle even touches your lips, Margit summons a spectral dagger of holy light and flings it at you. You trade a heal for damage, often ending up with less health than you started with. It is maddening. It feels personal. The true solution to Margit is not in the boss arena. It is on the map. It is the Weeping Peninsula. To the south of Limgrave lies an entire sub-region that the guidance of grace completely ignores. Cross the Bridge of Sacrifice, guarded by a ballista naturally, and you find a land of rain, misery, and significantly easier loot. This area is the actual training ground. It is packed with sacred tears, which boost how much your flask heals, and golden seeds, which give you more flask charges. It has mines full of smithing stones to upgrade your weapon to +3 or +4. By ignoring the south and rushing the castle, you're skipping the training montage. You're trying to fight the heavyweight champion without doing your push-ups. This leads to the community's favourite phrase, "Put these foolish ambitions to rest." Margit says this when he kills you. He says it a lot. For the first week of the game's release, this line was burned into the collective consciousness of the player base. It became a meme, a trauma trigger, and a rallying cry. Forums were flooded with "I can't beat Margit" posts. The veterans' advice was split. The Gitgud crowd insisted you just needed to learn his patterns, which is true but painful. The explorers shouted "Go south." The players who went south returned at level 30 with a +4 claymore and found that the omen wasn't so fell after all. There is a fascinating layer of hidden mechanics and obscure lore that can trivialise this fight, if you know where to look. In a murky cave called Murkwater Cave, halfway up the river in Limgrave, you can fight a familiar face, Patches. If you spare him, as discussed in the Murdering the First Friendly Face section, Mercy has value, he opens a shop. He sells an item called Margit's Shackle. The shackle is a reusable item that, when activated, slams Margit into the dirt, binding him to the earth with golden magic for several seconds. You can use it twice in the first phase of the fight. It is a get-out-of-jail-free card. But why does Patches have it? And why does it work? This touches on the tragedy of Margit's true identity. Margit is an illusion, a projection of Morgoth, the Omen King, who rules Leyndell. He's a demigod, the son of Marika and Godfrey. But he was born as an omen, a being cursed with horns. In the Golden Order, omen babies are usually mutilated, their horns cut off, which kills most of them, or thrown into the sewers to rot. Morgoth and his twin brother Mog were of royal blood, so they were shackled deep underground in the subterranean shunning grounds. The shackle item is literally the magical restraint used to bind him as a child. It works on him because it is the physical manifestation of his childhood trauma. You're using his abuse against him. The lore irony here is palpable. Morgoth is the only demigod who actually stayed loyal to the Erd Tree. While his siblings waged war for power, he took up a stick and defended the empty throne. He calls you emboldened by the flame of ambition, projecting his own complex onto you. He sees ambition as a sin because his family's ambition destroyed the world. He guards the gate not to keep you out of the castle, but to keep you away from the throne, protecting an order that despises his very existence. He is the self-loathing watchdog of a broken religion, but you don't know this yet. You just know he is hitting you with a hammer made of golden light. The mistake of rushing Margit is also a failure to utilise the co-op summons, specifically placed for this fight. Right before the fog wall, there is a gold summon sign for Sorcerer Rogier. Rogier is a suave spellcasting NPC who can distract Margit effectively. If you bring Rogier and summon your spirit jellyfish or wolves, you turn the duel into a 3v1 brawl. Margit's AI struggles to handle multiple targets. He switches aggro constantly, exposing his back to your attacks. This isn't cheating, it is the canonical way Tarnished fight, in packs, using every advantage. Rogier himself is investigating the castle for his own dark reasons, related to the Knight of Black Knives and Deathroot, so bringing him along makes narrative sense. When you finally defeat Margit, whether through grinding levels in the south, using the shackle, or summoning the squad, the feeling is euphoric. Enemy felled, the barrier dissolves, Stormvale Castle awaits, but the lesson remains. The direct path is often the hardest. The game rewards the wanderer, the one who looks at the giant castle and says, "I'll get there later." After the adrenaline of the Margit fight, or perhaps after the 20th defeat sends you spiralling into depression, you might feel the need to retreat. You walk back to the Round Table Hold, the safe haven hub area that Melina teleported you to earlier. The hold is warm, the fire crackles, it is a place of rest. You wander the halls and find a room with a bed. Sitting on the bed is a woman in a dark dress. She is Fia, the deathbed companion. She speaks to you with a voice like honey. "Great champion, would you allow me to hold you but briefly? You are battered. You are bruised from the omen's cane. A hug sounds nice. It sounds human. You accept. She embraces you. You see a baldachin's blessing appear in your inventory. You feel warm and fuzzy inside. You walk away, feeling loved. But you have just made the 10th mistake. You have accepted a gift that comes with a terrible, invisible price. You have contracted a magical STD that is secretly ruining your build. The Roundtable Hold is a strange place. It exists outside of time, or perhaps outside of space, a sanctuary severed from the physical map of the lands between. It is a place of creaking wood, roaring fireplaces, and the heavy, melancholic silence of warriors who know they are marching toward their doom. It is the only place in the game where you cannot swing your sword, a safe zone enforced by a pacifist magic that feels almost claustrophobic. And in this safe zone, tucked away in a bedroom filled with books and soft velvet, sits Fia. She is the deathbed companion. She is gentle. She is arguably the most empathetic character you have met so far. In a world of screaming, grafted monstrosities and rot-infested dogs, her offer is dangerously tempting. "Will you let me hold you?" she asks. It is an offer of intimacy in a game devoid of it. It taps into a primal human need for comfort, especially after Margit has just spent 3 hours pushing your face into the mud. So, you say yes. You kneel. She embraces you. The animation is tender. She cradles your head against her chest, whispering assurances that you are warm, that you are alive. And in that moment of vulnerability, you commit the 10th great mistake, the warm embrace that steals your vitality. You leave the room feeling emotionally supported, carrying a new item called Baldachin's Blessing in your inventory. What you do not notice, or perhaps you notice it but do not understand it, is the small red square icon with a downward pointing arrow that has appeared under your stamina bar. This is not a buff, it is a curse. By accepting Fia's hug, you have sacrificed 5% of your maximum health. This is the genius of Hidetaka Miyazaki's design. He weaponized a hug. The Baldachin's Blessing acts as a physical manifestation of the vitality she siphoned from you. As long as that blessing sits in your inventory, unused, your health bar is capped at 95% of its potential. You're walking around with a phantom wound. 5% might sound negligible. I have 1000 health, so I lost 50 points. Big deal, you might think. But in Elden Ring, survival is often a game of single digits. How many times have you survived a boss attack with a sliver of health so thin it looks like a single red pixel? That pixel is the 5% you gave to Fia. That pixel is the difference between rolling away to heal and staring at the "you died" screen. If you combine this with the glass cannon mistake from earlier, you're essentially playing on hard mode without realizing it. The mistake is compounded by the hoarding instinct we discussed in section 8. The Baldachin's Blessing is a consumable item. It increases your poise, stagger resistance, for a short time. When you use it, the item disappears and the health debuff is removed. But because players are hoarders, they see a unique item given by a nice lady and think, "I better save this for a special occasion." Or they think it's a keepsake, a token of affection they want to hold on to, so they keep the blessing in their pocket for the entire game, carrying the health penalty from Limgrave all the way to the final boss. They are literally loving themselves to death. The community reaction to this mechanic was a mixture of horror and hilarity. When the game first launched, forums were flooded with posts asking, "What is this red square icon?" When the answer was revealed, that the nice lady gave you a magical STD, sexually transmitted debuff, it became one of the game's defining memes. It was a harsh lesson in the rules of this universe. Nothing is free. Not even kindness. Especially not kindness. But why does she do it? The obscure lore behind Fia and her profession transforms this mechanical prank into a deeply disturbing narrative beat. Fia is not just a lonely woman. She is a necromantic vessel. A deathbed companion is a specific role from her homeland. Her purpose is to lie with dead nobles, absorbing the warmth and vigour from living champions, that's you, and transferring it into the corpse to grant it a second, albeit accursed, life. When she holds you, she isn't comforting you, she is harvesting you. You are a battery. She is draining your life force to incubate a resurrection. Specifically, if you follow her questline to its conclusion, you learn that she is gathering this vigour to lay with the corpse of Godwyn the Golden, the first demigod to die. Godwyn's body is a twisted aquatic horror distorting the roots of the Erd tree deep beneath the capital. Fear intends to sleep with this abomination to birth the mending rune of the Death Prince, effectively legalizing undead existence in the Golden Order. Your 5% health isn't just vanishing, it is being fed to a fishman corpse god to usher in an age of zombies. It adds a whole new layer of regret to that cuddle session. The item description of the deathbed dress and the baldachin's blessing itself hints at this transactional nature. The blessing is described as favour bestowed by a deathbed companion. The word baldachin refers to a ceremonial canopy over an altar or throne, but historically it also refers to the canopy over a bed of state. In this context, the bed is an altar of death. Fear is a priestess of a funeral cult, and you are the unwitting sacrifice offering up your vitality to her cause. There is also a fascinating connection to another NPC, Lionel the Lion-Hearted. If you fight the Fear's champion's boss fight later in her quest, Lionel appears as a phantom. You can also find his heavy armour and the deathbed smallclothes in the capital. The lore implies that Lionel was Fear's previous champion. He likely acted as her father figure or protector, perhaps even a previous source of vigour. He failed to protect her, or perhaps he gave too much of himself, dying in the process. When you accept her hug, you're stepping into Lionel's heavy, tragic boots. Mechanically, the debuff teaches players to pay attention to their HUD, heads-up display. Elden Ring is notorious for not explaining its status icons. There is no mouse-over tooltip. You have to infer what is happening. The red square with the down arrow is a visual language. If you see a sword with an up arrow, your attack is boosted. If you see a shield with a down arrow, your defense is compromised. The game expects you to be observant. Ignoring the icon is a failure of observation, a symptom of the autopilot mode that gets you killed. So how do you fix this mistake? It is simple. Open your inventory, find the Baldachin's blessing, use it. Your character will glow with a brief aura of poise. Then, wait. The icon will disappear. Your health bar will stretch back to its full length. You are whole again. You can still visit Fear. Her quest is essential for one of the game's endings, and the lore is fantastic. But you must remember the cost. If you hug her, pop the blessing immediately. Do not carry the weight of her affection into the battlefield. And speaking of not knowing where you stand, once you leave the hold and return to the open world, you are faced with a sprawling, confusing landscape. You have your horse, you have your sword, but you likely do not have a map. You're wandering into the fog of war, guided only by distant landmarks. And this leads to the 11th mistake, a blunder of navigation that turns a 10-minute journey into a 3-hour trek through hell. You're exploring without the steelies. You're wandering blindly without a map. The world of Elden Ring is vast. It is a sprawling, vertical, subterranean and aerial nightmare of geography that seems designed specifically to make you lose your bearings. When you first enter a new region, be it the sinking wetlands of Liurnia or the autumn-coloured plateaus of Altus, your map screen is not a helpful guide. It is a fog of war, a brown-smudged blur of emptiness that tells you absolutely nothing about the cliffs, canyons and poisoned swamps that lie ahead. And this leads to the 11th great mistake, wandering blindly without a map. It is a mistake born of the explorer's spirit. You see a new horizon and you just ride. You ignore the main road because in open-world games the main road is for casuals, right? The cool stuff is always off the beaten path, so you veer left. You ride torrent into a thicket of trees. Suddenly the ground drops away. You're at the bottom of a ravine. You try to climb out, but the walls are too steep. You ride north, hoping for a ramp, but you find a dead end guarded by a giant crayfish that snipes you with a jet of water from 300 yards away. You are lost, you are frustrated, and you have no idea where the nearest site of grace is because your map is just a blank slab of beige. The tragedy of this mistake is that the game is actively trying to help you, but it is doing so in a language so subtle that millions of players missed it for weeks. Open your blank map. Look closely at the brown smudge. It isn't completely featureless. You can see the faint outlines of major roads, pale, squiggly lines cutting through the fog, and if you follow those lines with your eyes, you will eventually spot a tiny, microscopic icon. It looks like a little glowing obelisk, or a small lighthouse. That icon is the map stele. That is where the map fragment is. The facepalm of the century occurred for many players around the 40-hour mark when they realised this. The game doesn't hide the maps in random chests or behind boss fights, usually. It places them on the side of the main road, marked on your blank map before you even get there. The mechanic is shouting at you. Ride to the little pillar icon first, get the map, then explore. By ignoring this, you're choosing to navigate a labyrinth in the dark when the light switch is right next to the door. This mistake is most punishing in the region of Liurnia of the Lakes. This area is a massive flooded basin surrounded by high cliffs. Without the map, it feels like an endless, indistinguishable swamp. You can spend hours riding in circles, getting turned around by the fog, missing the Academy Gate entirely. But with the map, you see the topography clearly. You see that the lake is actually shaped like a giant flooded valley. You see the islands. You see the specific ruins. The map transforms the environment from a chaotic mess into a navigable puzzle. There is a beautiful, melancholic bit of obscure lore hidden in the very concept of these maps and the steles that hold them. If you read the description of the map Limgrave West or any other fragment, it notes the style of the drawing. It says, Map of Limgrave. The simple, realistic style of this map confirms that it was created by a ray of light, or perhaps by a person. This description is strange. Created by a ray of light. It implies that the map isn't just ink on parchment. It might be a projection of the guidance of grace itself, etched into the world. But the placement of the steles tells a sadder story. These tall stone monuments are almost always found along the high roads, established by the Golden Order at the height of its power. They are remnants of a time when this land was civilized, when travellers needed directions, when there was commerce and movement between the castles. Now the roads are broken, the bridges are collapsed, the soldiers patrolling them are mindless husks. The map stealers stand as lonely monuments to a unified kingdom that no longer exists. When you pick up a map fragment, you are recovering a piece of history, a snapshot of the world before the shattering broke it apart. You are literally piecing the world back together, one rectangle at a time. Furthermore, the map of the lands between itself hides a massive secret that the community is obsessed over. If you look at the centre of the fully revealed map, where the 6 divine towers converge, there is a mysterious cloud. For 2 years, fans theorised that something was hidden there. DLC? A lost city? The impact crater of a meteor? With the release of Shadow of the Erdtree, we learned that this void is indeed significant. It is the suppression of the Shadowlands, hidden from the Erdtree's view. By filling in your map, you are defining the boundaries of the perceived world, outlining the lie that Marika constructed. You're drawing the cage. The community debate around navigation often centres on the no HUD, no map challenge runs. There is a subset of masochistic players who believe the only immersive way to play is to turn off the compass and map entirely, navigating solely by landmarks like the Erdtree or the Academy of Raya Lucaria. They argue that the map trivialises the sense of scale, and to be fair, seeing the Erdtree looming in the distance is a better compass than any UI element. But for the first-time player, this is madness. Elden Ring is bigger than Skyrim and Breath of the Wild combined, with vertical layering that defies logic. Trying to find the entrance to the deep-root depths without a map is like trying to find a specific needle in a stack of needles. There is also the tactical advantage of the map that blind wanderers miss: the telescope. The bird's-eye telescope markers on the map allow you to zoom out and view the landscape from a high angle. This isn't just for taking screenshots, it is a reconnaissance tool. You can spot hidden caves, enemy camps, and loot locations from safety. Ignoring the map means ignoring your satellite surveillance. So the next time you enter a new zone and the screen turns brown, stop. Do not ride into the woods. Open the menu, look for the little lighthouse icon, place a blue beacon of light on it, ride directly there. Ignore the enemies, ignore the shiny items, get the map. Suddenly the world will gain colour. The cliffs will have definition. You will see that the dead end you are stuck in is actually next to a spirit spring jump that launches you to safety. Knowledge is power, and in the lands between, cartography is the highest form of knowledge. With your map in hand, you navigate the wetlands of Liurnia. You see the towering structure in the centre, the Academy of Raya Lucaria. It is a school of magic, a place of glintstone and sorcery. You fight your way inside, defeating the Red Wolf of Radagon, and finally stand before the master of the house, Renala, Queen of the Full Moon. You are a mage, you have levelled intelligence, you have your glintstone staff, you're ready to engage in a wizard duel. You cast your strongest spell, it hits her, and her health bar moves barely a pixel. You have walked into the 12th mistake. You are stubbornly hitting magic resistance. You have brought a flashlight to a laser fight, and you are about to learn that in the world of RPGs, adaptability is far more valuable than specialization. The Grand Library of Raya Lucaria is one of the most atmospheric and unsettling arenas in the entire game. The air smells of old parchment and stagnant wax. The floor is polished to a mirror sheen, reflecting the thousands of books that line the towering shelves, and in the centre of it all, floating in a golden amber aura, is Renala, Queen of the Full Moon. She's cradling an egg, cooing to it like a mother, surrounded by her sweetings, creepy juvenile scholars who crawl across the floor singing lullabies and shooting books at you. If you are playing a strength build, wielding a giant slab of iron, this fight is often a victory lap. Renala has very little physical poise. You walk up, you hit her with a hammer, she falls down, you repeat. It is a scene of domestic violence that feels almost unfair. But if you are a sorcerer, if you have spent the last 30 hours pumping your intelligence stat, hunting down scrolls and perfecting your glintstone arc, you are about to walk into a wall of your own making. This is the 12th great mistake, stubbornly hitting magic resistance. It is the refusal to adapt your damage type to the enemy in front of you, a stubborn insistence that, if I cast it hard enough, it will work. You enter the second phase of the fight. The illusion shatters. You are transported to a moonlit ocean, an infinite plain of water and starlight. It is breathtaking. Ranni the Witch speaks from the void, conjuring a spectral projection of her mother in her prime. The real Renala rises. She spins her staff. She summons a literal full moon and throws it at you. You, the master wizard, wind up your strongest spell. Maybe it's Comet Azure, the legendary laser beam you found near the volcano. Maybe it's Stars of Ruin. You fire. The blue energy screams across the water and slams into the queen. And the health bar moves, barely. It's like throwing a water balloon at the ocean. Renala has an absurdly high resistance to magic damage, hovering around 80%. She is the Queen of Caria. She invented these spells. Trying to kill her with glintstone magic is like trying to drown a fish. It is technically possible if you have enough water, but it is the least efficient method imaginable. The mistake here is a lack of versatility. Many players view their build as a rigid identity. I am a mage, therefore I cast blue spells. They ignore the fact that Elden Ring provides tools for mages to deal physical damage. The most famous of these is the spell Rock Sling. Found in the swamps of Caelid, if you survive the rot, this gravity sorcery pulls 3 massive boulders out of the earth and hurls them at the target. Here is the mechanical nuance. Despite scaling with your intelligence stat and being cast from a staff, Rock Sling deals 100% physical damage. It does not care about magic resistance, it hits like a truck. If the stubborn mage simply switched from the blue laser to the brown rocks, Renala would crumble. She has terrible physical defense. The game is testing your knowledge of its elemental systems. It is asking, are you a master of magic or just a button masher? The lore behind this fight adds a tragic layer to your struggle. The Renala you're fighting in the second phase isn't real. The real Renala is the broken woman on the floor in the first phase, clutching the amber egg. She lost her mind when her husband, Radagon, left her to marry Queen Marika. The Renala who throws moons at you is an automated defense system, a magical trap set by her daughter, Ranni, to protect her mother's dignity. The obscure lore regarding the amber egg she holds is fascinating and vital to understanding the game's metaphysics. This is the Great Rune of the Unborn. Unlike every other Great Rune you collect, which you have to activate at Divine Tower, this one is perfect as it is. It was a parting gift from Radagon. The description says it grants the perfection of rebirth. However, the creepy sweetings in the library, the students who crawl and sing, are examples of rebirth gone wrong. They are frail, short-lived, and childlike. This implies that while the rune is perfect, Renala's understanding of it is flawed, or perhaps her grief has corrupted the process. She is trapped in a cycle of birthing imperfect children, obsessed with a fresh start that she can never truly achieve. This connects directly to the mechanics of the game. After you defeat her, hopefully by throwing rocks, Renala becomes a non-hostile NPC. She offers you the ability to rebirth, to respec your stats. You can fix the mistakes we talked about earlier. You can take points out of strength and put them into vigour. You can stop being a glass cannon. It is a narrative and mechanical mercy. The queen, who couldn't perfect rebirth for her children, grants it to you, the Tarnished. allowing you to be born anew as a better warrior. The community debate surrounding this fight often centers on the magic is easy mode narrative. For 90% of the game, sorcery allows you to stand back and destroy enemies from safety. Melee players often resent this, calling wizards cowards who don't learn boss patterns. But Renala is the great equalizer. She is the moment where the melee players get to sit back and laugh while the wizards cry. The forums fill with posts titled, "Renala is impossible for mage build," while the strength players reply with, "Just hit her with a stick, lol." It highlights a core design philosophy of Elden Ring. Every build has a predator. If you rely on a shield, Malenia will heal off you. If you rely on holy damage, the final boss will laugh at you. If you rely on magic, Renala will humble you. The mistake is not playing a mage. The mistake is playing only a mage without a backup plan. There is also a subtle, easy-to-miss detail in the arena itself. During the first phase, suspended above the library floor are paintings. If you look closely with a telescope, if you aren't being bitten by children, you can see they depict the Carian royal family. You see Radagon, red-haired and stoic. You see Rykard, Radan and Rani in their youth. It is a gallery of a broken family, hanging above the wreckage of the mother who couldn't keep them together. You're fighting in a mausoleum of memories. Once you defeat the projection and the moon fades, you're left in the library with the real Renala. She doesn't die. She just sits there, offering to change your stats. "Ye who wish to be born anew," she whispers. You have her great rune. You have the path forward. You're technically done with the academy. The guidance of grace points you toward the capital, Leyndell, to the Erd Tree, and many players, feeling the momentum of the story, rush off to the Altus Plateau. They take the grand lift of Dectus, eager to reach the endgame. But in doing so, they commit the 13th mistake. They ignore the backyard. They ignore the mist-shrouded manor that sits just to the north of the academy. They ignore the invitation of the Blue Witch who gave them their spirit bell. By rushing the main quest, they bypass the most intricate, world-spanning and ending-defining side quest in the entire game. They ignore the witch in the tower, and in doing so, they miss the stars themselves. Leaving the Grand Library of Raya Lucaria, you step out into the cool air of Liurnia. The Queen is subdued, the Great Rune is yours, and the path forward seems clear. The guidance of grace points relentlessly eastward, toward the grand lift of Dectus and the golden plateaus of the capital. And this is where the 13th mistake happens. It is a mistake of omission, a blunder of itinerary that shrinks your world by nearly a third. You turn your back on the north, you turn your back on Caria Manor, and in doing so, you ignore the witch in the tower. By following the critical path, you're playing the abridged version of Elden Ring. You're reading the summary instead of the novel, because tucked away in the foggy northern reaches of the lake, guarded by a house of horrors, sits Rani the Witch. Ignoring her service is not just missing a side quest, it is missing the entire B-plot of the universe, which takes you to places that defy physics, logic, and gravity. To reach her, you must first brave Caria Manor. This location is infamous for one specific enemy type that has likely caused more Alt F4 rage quits than any boss: the Finger Creepers. These are giant, disembodied hands with too many rings, scuttling across the floor like spiders. They bury themselves in the dirt, waiting for you to walk over them, at which point they burst from the earth to crush you. They are a masterclass in nightmare fuel. Many players see the first hand say, "Absolutely not," and turn around. This is the filter. But if you push past the hands and the magical Knight Loretta, you reach the Three Sisters, 3 stone towers standing on a cliff edge. In the middle tower, Rani waits. She's the blue-skinned, 4-armed doll you met briefly, as Renna, to get your spirit bell. Now she reveals her true name and her true ambition. She's an Empyrean, a candidate for godhood who rejected the Golden Order. She wants to usher in an age of stars. The mistake of ignoring her is primarily a mistake of exploration. Rani's questline is the key that unlocks the underground map. If you don't serve Rani, you might never find Nokron, the Eternal City. You might see the Siofra River well elevator, ride it down, and see a small portion of the underground. But without Rani's quest, specifically without defeating Starscourge Redan to open the crater in Limgrave, the upper city of Nokron remains sealed. Nokron is breathtaking. It is a city of cold, white stone and black architecture, buried miles beneath the surface, yet illuminated by a false night sky filled with nebulae and stars. It is quiet. The enemies here are the silver tears, liquid metal shapeshifters that move with a slow, eerie grace. The atmosphere is thick with a sense of lost history. This is the civilization that committed high treason against the greater will and was buried alive for it. By skipping Ranni's quest, you miss the aesthetic peak of the game. You also miss the loot. Ranni's quest is a piñata of legendary items. It gives you the Dark Moon Greatsword, the latest iteration of the Moonlight Greatsword, a weapon that has appeared in almost every From Software game since King's Field. It is a glowing blue blade that shoots beams of moonlight. If you are a mage, and we know you are because you just beat Renala, this is your Excalibur. More importantly, this quest gives you the Mimic Tear Spirit Ash. We mentioned this earlier, but it cannot be overstated. The Mimic Tear is found in a chest behind an imp statue lock in the Knight's Sacred Ground, a sub-area of Nokron. If you don't do Ranni's quest, you don't get the clone. You are voluntarily playing on a harder difficulty setting. There is a profound piece of obscure lore hidden in the item that Ranni asks you to retrieve, the Fingerslayer Blade. You find this in the deepest vault of Nokron. The item description is chilling. It says, "The hidden treasure of the eternal city of Nokron, a blade said to have been born of a corpse." This blood-drenched fetish is proof of the high treason committed by the Eternal City and symbolises its downfall. The blade is not made of metal, it is made of a body. Look closely at the icon. It looks twisted, fleshy. The lore implies that the Nox, the people of the Eternal City, were trying to create a weapon capable of harming the Greater Will and its vassals, the Two Fingers. They succeeded, but the cost was their banishment. When you hand this blade to Ranni, you are handing her the nuclear football. You're giving her the weapon she needs to assassinate her own Two Fingers, cutting her ties to the destiny that was forced upon her. You become an accessory to deicide. This leads to one of the most intense community debates in the game's history, the mistranslation of the Age of Stars. When you finish Ranni's quest and trigger her ending, she speaks a monologue about her new order. In the English localization, her words sound cold, distant, almost villainous. She talks about keeping things far away and a chill night. Many players interpreted this as Ranni abandoning the world to freeze in the dark, replacing the tyranny of the Erd Tree with the tyranny of the Void. They argued that she was just another selfish demigod. However, bilingual fans and translators in the community quickly pointed out that the original Japanese text has a different nuance. In the original, Ranni isn't saying she will make the world cold. She's saying she will take the order, the laws of physics, magic and control, and remove it from the Earth, taking it on a 1,000-year voyage into the stars. She wants to separate the concept of God from the lives of mortals. She believes that people shouldn't be able to see, touch, or worship the order. It should be distant like the stars so that people can live freely without the meddling of gods. She isn't abandoning the world. She's liberating it by removing the government. This debate, is Ranni a saviour or a monster, defines the ethical landscape of the game's endings. Mechanically, skipping this quest also means skipping the Lake of Rot. Now you might argue that skipping a giant swamp of red scarlet rot that slows your movement and kills you in seconds is a good thing, and you might be right. But the Lake of Rot hides the Grand Cloister, and the boss fight against Astel, natural born of the Void. Astel is a cosmic horror, a giant skeletal dragonfly with a human skull and mandibles made of nebulas. He hangs from the ceiling of the cave firing laser beams. He is a creature from deep space that crashed into the lands between long ago. Fighting him is a spectacle. It reinforces the idea that the world of Elden Ring is not just high fantasy, it is cosmic horror. Aliens exist and they have gravity magic. If you rush the capital, you never see the alien. You stay in the medieval lane, missing the sci-fi twist. Finally, there is the miniature Ranni interaction. At a certain point in the quest, you find a doll that looks like Ranni. You sit at a site of grace in the Ainsel River main. The menu gives you an option. Talk to miniature Ranni. If you click it once, nothing happens, she says. Most players stop there. It's just a doll, they think. But if you are persistent, if you annoy the doll by talking to it 3 or 4 times, she breaks. I hadn't expected any soul to recognize me in this guise, she sighs, but now the cat is out of the bag. She then proceeds to open up to you, revealing her fears, her exhaustion, and her affection for her shadows, Bled Niji. It is the only time in the game a demigod speaks to you like a person, not a lord. It turns the aloof Ice Witch into a tragic, relatable figure. Ignoring the quest denies you this intimacy. So, do not fear the North. Do not fear the hands. Well, fear them a little. Go to the tower. Pledge your service. The journey will take you to the bottom of the world and the edge of the cosmos. But as you journey through these vast, dangerous lands, collecting runes and defeating demigods, you're also collecting something else. In your inventory, under the Key Items tab, sit the Great Runes. You have Godric's, you have Renalas, maybe you have Radahns, and you also have a pile of items called Rune Arcs. You look at them, you see they are consumables, and your hoarder brain kicks in again. I'll save these for a hard boss, you say. I don't want to waste them. And so, you commit the 14th mistake. You play the entire game with your god powers turned off. You leave the dormant power of the Great Runes sleeping in your pocket, fighting as a mortal when you could be fighting as a demigod. You have killed the lords of the old world, you have stripped the armour from their corpses, claimed their weapons as your own, and taken their remembrance to the finger reader to hear their eulogies. But most importantly, you have taken their great runes, the literal shards of the Elden Ring that fueled their madness and their might. You are carrying the crystallization of order itself in your satchel. You are, by all definitions, a walking pantheon of dormant divinity, and yet, you are likely fighting with the strength of a mere mortal because you are too afraid to crack open a rune arc. This is the 14th great mistake, the dormant power of great runes. The mechanism for using these runes is admittedly bureaucratic, a multi-step process that feels designed to filter out the impatient. First, you acquire the rune from the boss. At this point, it is a grey, lifeless rock. To wake it up, you must ascend the specific divine tower associated with that demigod. For Godric, it is the massive bridge extending from Stormvale, guarded by 3 giant golems, one of whom has a laser bow and a teleporter that flings you across the sea. For Radahn, it is a hellish climb up the side of a cliff in Dragonbarrow, requiring platforming skills that the game engine was never really designed to handle. Once you reach the top, you find the 2 fingers, or rather, the dead, woody husks of them. You interact with the centre of the tower and the rune bursts into flame. It is now Restore. But you aren't done. You must go to a site of grace, select the Great Runes menu, and equip it. And even then, it is still inactive. It sits in a slot next to your health bar, dark and dull. To truly turn it on, you must consume a rune arc. Only then, finally, does the icon glow gold. Only then does your character surge with power. The mistake is purely psychological. Rune arcs are relatively rare items. You find them in chests, or you earn them by helping other players in co-op, or murdering them in invasions. Because they are finite, and because the effect is lost upon death, the elixir syndrome kicks in with a vengeance. You think, if I use this rune arc now, and then I fall off a cliff 5 minutes later, I have wasted it. This fear of loss paralyzes you. You save the arcs for a serious attempt on a boss. But because you don't know the boss's moves yet, you don't use it on the first 10 tries. And once you do know the moves, you think, I almost have him, I don't need the arc. The result is that you finish the game with 45 rune arcs in your inventory, having never felt the rush of godhood, and what a rush it is. Let's talk about Godric's Great Rune, the first one you likely acquired. Its effect is deceptively simple. It grants +5 to every single attribute: Vigour, Mind, Endurance, Strength, Dexterity, Intelligence, Faith, Arcane. That is a total of 40 free levels. 40 levels. In the early to mid-game, this is game-breaking. That +5 Vigour might push you over the threshold to survive a grab attack. That +5 Endurance might allow you to wear the heavier armour without fat rolling. That +5 Intelligence might let you wield a staff you aren't technically qualified for yet. By refusing to use a rune arc, you're voluntarily suppressing your own potential. You're fighting Margit's brother, Morgott, or the Draconic Sentinels, with one hand tied behind your back, all to save a consumable item that has no value once the credits roll. There is a deep and symbolic piece of obscure lore hidden in the visual design of the rune arc itself. If you look closely at the item icon, it is the lower basin of the Elden Ring's design, the U shape that cradles the rest of the structure. The item description reads, The lower arc of the Elden Ring is held to be the basin in which its blessings pool. This implies that the blessing or grace of the Golden Order is a liquid concept, a spiritual fluid that gathers in the lowest point. When you break a rune arc, you're essentially shattering a piece of this basin to release the stored energy into your own body. You're drinking from the cup of the Erd Tree. However, there is a darker implication. The rune arcs are shards of the shattered ring. The basin is broken. It can no longer hold the blessing permanently, which is why the effect leaks out of you when you die. You're a cracked vessel trying to hold water. The power is temporary because the world itself is broken. This ties into the tragic lore of the divine towers themselves. At the top of each tower, you find a pair of 2 fingers. But unlike the ones in the Round Table Hold, these are dead. They are burnt, curled, and silent. Why? The lore suggests that when the Elden Ring was shattered, the shockwave was so metaphysical and violent that it literally killed the communication lines to the greater will. The fingers on the towers died of shock, or perhaps were severed from the network. When you activate a rune there, you're essentially jump-starting it using the residual energy of a dead prophet. It is a lonely, quiet act of scavenging power from a corpse. The community debate regarding great runes often revolves around the Godric versus Morgott vs Radahn hierarchy. For the first half of the game, Godric's rune is the undisputed king. The flat stat boost is unmatched. But as players reach the soft caps, the point where leveling a stat gives diminishing returns, Godric's rune loses value. If you already have 60 vigour, gaining +5 more doesn't add much health. This is where the debate shifts to Morgott's Great Rune. It provides a massive 25% increase to maximum HP. For a late-game tank build, this is astronomical. It allows players to reach health pools that make them feel like raid bosses. Then there is Radahn's Rune, which boosts HP, stamina, and FP by 15%. The community argues endlessly about the math. Radahn's is better if you're a caster. No, Morgott's is better for survival. Meanwhile, a small, chaotic subset of players swears by Malenia's Great Rune, which introduces a bloodborne mechanic, allowing you to recover health by attacking enemies after you take damage. It changes the entire rhythm of the game from defensive to hyper-aggressive. But the biggest debate isn't about which rune is best, it's about the scarcity of rune arcs. Many players feel that rune arcs should be purchasable or craftable. They argue that tying such a core mechanic to a limited resource discourages fun. I want to play with Malenia's lifesteal mechanic, they say on Reddit, but I only have 10 arcs left, so I can't risk it. They make a valid point. The fear of running out actively hurts the variety of gameplay. There is a particular tragedy in the Rune Level 1 RL1 community, the masochists who beat the game without leveling up once. For them, Godric's Great Rune is the Holy Grail. It is the only way they can wield certain weapons. An RL1 player with a rune arc is effectively RL41. For them, a rune arc is not a bonus, it is a lifeline. They treat these items with a reverence that the average player, drowning in unused consumables, cannot understand. Mechanically, the game does offer a renewable source of rune arcs, but it requires you to engage with the multiplayer system. Helping another player defeat a boss rewards you with an arc. Invading and killing a host of fingers rewards you with an arc. This is Miyazaki's subtle social engineering. He is bribing you to interact. He is saying, if you want the power of the gods, you must engage with your fellow man, either as a saviour or a predator. The hoarding mistake, then, is also a mistake of isolation. If you engaged in co-op more often, you would be swimming in arcs, and the fear of losing them would vanish. So go to the tower, wake up the rune, then sit at a grace and equip it. And the next time you step through a fog wall to face a horror like the Fire Giant or the Godskin Duo, open your inventory, crush the arc, watch your character glow, watch your health bar extend across the screen. Feel the power of Godric the Golden coursing through your veins. You will likely still die, but you will die a demigod, not a peasant. And when you respawn, use another one. They are meant to be used. The ring was shattered so its shards could be claimed. Do not let them gather dust. However, even with the power of the great runes, even with the map, the summons, and the crafting kit, there is one final, fatal flaw that persists in the heart of every Tarnished. It is a flaw of temperament. It is the voice that speaks to you when the boss is at 1% health. The boss is panting. You are panting. You have no flasks left. The boss raises its sword for one final slow combo, and you think, I can hit him before he hits me. You abandon your defense. You abandon your rhythm. You swing. This is the 15th and final mistake. It is the greed before the final blow. It is the tragic snatching of defeat from the jaws of victory, the universal choke that has caused more broken controllers than any bugs or glitches combined. The health bar is a sliver of red. It is a single glowing pixel, barely visible against the dark background of the boss interface. The music has reached its crescendo, a choir of screaming operatic voices, swelling strings, and thunderous percussion. Your heart is pounding in your ears, a physical drumbeat that drowns out the game audio. You are out of crimson flasks. Your FP bar is empty. Your character is battered, standing on the precipice of death, with barely enough health to survive a stiff breeze. But so is the boss. It is Malekith, the Black Blade. Or perhaps it is the Elden Beast. It doesn't matter who it is. What matters is that they are one hit away. In this moment, time distorts. The rational part of your brain, the part that learned the dodge timings, the part that memorized the attack patterns, the part that patiently waited for openings for the last 10 minutes, shut down. It is replaced by a primal, lizard brain impulse. A voice screams in your mind, hit him, just hit him, it's over. You abandon your spacing, you sprint forward, you wind up a heavy attack, you're already celebrating the victory in your head. You can see the God slain text before it even appears, but the boss does not die. Instead, Malekith spins. He performs that one specific delayed backflip slash that you know how to dodge, but you aren't dodging, you are attacking. Your sword connects with his armor, clang, but his health bar doesn't empty. Maybe he has 1 HP left. Maybe the game rounded up. It doesn't matter. His blade glows with the red flame of destined death. He swings. You are mid-animation. You cannot roll. You take counter damage, a mechanic where you take significantly more damage because you are caught while attacking. You die. The boss stands over your fading corpse with that same single pixel of health remaining. The screen fades to black. The music stops abruptly. You're left alone in the silence of your room, staring at your reflection in the darkened screen, holding a controller that you have a sudden, violent urge to throw through the window. This is the 15th and final mistake. It is the most human mistake of all. It is greed before the final blow. It is the tragedy of the magic pixel. We have all been there. It is the moment where discipline collapses under the weight of anticipation. The mistake is assuming that the fight is over before the enemy dissolves into dust. In Elden Ring, a boss is most dangerous when they are dying. This is not just a figure of speech. It is often a mechanical reality. The game's AI is programmed to punish this exact behavior. While it has never been officially confirmed by From Software, the community has gathered endless anecdotal evidence of what they call input reading, or panic punishment. When a boss is at low health, they often seem to chain their most difficult combos back to back. They become hyper-aggressive. They refuse to stagger. It feels as though the game knows you, are desperate. There is a specific mechanical reason why this greed is so fatal, rooted in the counter-hit system mentioned earlier. In Elden Ring, your defense stats are not static. If you're standing still, you have your base defense. But if you're sprinting, or if you are in the middle of an attack animation, your absorption for pierce damage and often other types drops. This is why getting hit while trying to trade blows hurts so much more than getting hit while trying to block. You're essentially opening your guard to land that final strike, turning a survivable hit into a one-shot kill. The game baits you into making yourself vulnerable. The lore of the game mirrors this struggle between control and bloodlust perfectly, specifically in the story of the first Elden Lord, Godfrey. When you fight him at the foot of the Erd Tree, he is a regal, noble warrior. He carries a spectral lion, Serosh, on his back. The obscure lore hidden in the Beastclaw Greathammer and the Icon Shield reveals that Serosh is not just a pet, he is a limiter. Godfrey was once a bloodthirsty barbarian named Huara Lu. To become a lord fit for civilized society, he took Serosh upon his back to suppress his ceaseless lust for battle. In the second phase of his fight, when his health gets low, Godfrey realizes he cannot win as a lord. He kills Serosh. He rips the limiter off his own back, drenches himself in blood and reverts to Huara Lu warrior. He embraces the greed. He embraces the bloodlust. "I have given thee courtesy enough," he roars. He discards his weapon and fights you with his bare hands, grabbing you, slamming you into the earth. The irony is profound. The boss enters his greed mode mechanically and narratively. He abandons defense for pure offense. If you do the same, if you meet his greed with your own, you will lose, because he is a 10-foot-tall demigod with 20,000 hit points, and you are a Tarnished with a drinking problem. The only way to defeat Huaralu is to remain the disciplined lord he failed to be. You must maintain your rhythm. You must dodge his grabs. You must wait for the opening, even when he is at 1% health. You must be the calm in the center of his storm. This leads to the great community conspiracy, the invincible last HP theory. Search the subreddits, and you will find thousands of posts from players swearing that bosses have a hidden damage reduction buff on their final hit point. I hit him for 500 damage, and his bar didn't move, they cry. The game cheated. Technically, data miners have looked into the code, and for the most part there is no invincibility script for the last hit. The boss has the same defense at 1 HP as they do at 100%, unless they are in a specific phase transition. What is actually happening is a psychological trick. The health bar in Elden Ring is a visual representation, and the very end of the bar is often deceptive. That last pixel might represent 50 or 100 hit points, depending on the scale of the boss's total health. You think a light attack will finish him because visually it looks like it should, but mathematically you need 2 hits. You commit to the assumption, and the math punishes you. This mistake is the culmination of all the previous ones. It is the impatience of the Golden Horseman Rusher, Section 1. It is the hubris of the Glass Cannon of Section 4. It is the refusal to use a pot or item to finish the fight safely, Section 8. It all converges in that final breathless second. To avoid this mistake, you must learn the hardest skill in the game, detachment. You must detach your emotion from the result. You must fight the boss at 1% health, exactly the same way you fought them at 100% health. You must respect the mechanics until the legend-felled text is fully on the screen. There is a tool that can save you from yourself, a tool often ignored by honourable duelists, the throwing knife, or the fan daggers. These small low-damage consumables have a near-instant release speed. When the boss is at that magic pixel, and you are terrified to close the distance because Malenia is winding up her rock bloom, do not run in, back up, throw a knife. It deals 40 damage. It is anticlimactic. It is cheesy. It lacks the cinematic glory of a final sword plunge, but it works. It is the weapon of the survivor. It is the answer to greed. But often we don't throw the knife. We want the glory. We want the cinematic finish. And so we die, resetting the fight, forced to do it all over again. And perhaps that is the point. Elden Ring is a game about cycles. The Golden Order is a cycle. The Elden Ring itself is a cycle of runes. You live, you die, you are reborn at the grace. The mistakes we have catalogued tonight, from the cliffs of the tutorial to the throne of the Elden Lord, are not failures of character, they are the curriculum of the Tarnished. You are meant to fall. You are meant to be crushed by the Sentinel, eaten by the dogs, tricked by the chests, and humbled by the Queen. Every mistake is a lesson etched in runes. The fat roll taught you the value of endurance, the Caelid trap taught you caution, the magic resistance of Renala taught you adaptability, and the greed at the end, well, that taught you humility. So, as you stand there looking at the You Died screen one last time, do not despair. The boss isn't going anywhere. The Erd Tree will still be burning when you wake up. The lands between are patient. They have waited an eternity for a lord. They can wait for you to try one more time. And so, the red letters fade and the screen returns to black. Not as a void of defeat, but as a canvas of rest. The mistakes we have catalogued tonight, the panicked rolls, the missed items, the stubborn refusals to adapt, they are not permanent marks on your soul. They are simply the footsteps of a journey that is long, winding, and beautifully difficult. In the lands between, death is not an ending. It is merely a deep breath before the next attempt. Find your way back to the nearest site of grace. Listen to that hum, the gentle crystalline resonance of the Golden Order's last comfort. Watch the particles of gold drift upward into the night air, swirling like fireflies in a summer field. The enemies in the distance have stopped their patrols. The dragons have roosted on the cliffs. The world, for all its hostility, has paused to let you rest. Let the controller fall from your hands. Let the tension in your shoulders unspool like a heavy knot finally coming loose. You do not need to dodge tonight. You do not need to watch your stamina bar or worry about the rot. The map is vast and the secrets are deep, but they will all be there tomorrow. For now, you're safe in the glow of the grace. The Erd Tree stands sentinel above you, a pillar of silent light guarding your slumber. The storms of Limgrave have quieted to a whisper, and the stars of the underground cities are twinkling just for you. Close your eyes. Let the weight of the armour slip away. Let the noise of the battle fade into the steady rhythm of your own breathing. You have done enough. You have fought enough. The journey continues, but the traveller must sleep. Sweet dreams.